So, welcome back to the Bruce Poinsette Show. If you've been following us for a while now, one of the things we've been regularly trying to follow up on are the charter reform provisions that are going to be on the ballot this November. And we're lucky to have a couple special guests with us today to help break it down for us. So, we have Salome Chimuku and Becca Uherbelau. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Thank you for having us.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so you both are, I should clarify, you both are coming here as private citizens who happen to be on the Charter Commission because these things are important. But, you know, like I said, you're here to help kind of, explain what are people going to be voting on in this November. But first, can you just talk about how you each got involved with the Charter Commission?
Yeah, I can start. So to get on the Portland Charter Commission, there's an open application process. Anyone who is a resident of the city of Portland can apply. At the time that I knew the process was opening up, I was the co-founder of the Black Resilience Fund, now housed within Brown Hope. And during the summer, we had a bunch of the protests, and during one of the city hall meetings, I had testified in an effort to defund the police. And my whole thought process was, give my 2 cents, voice my opinion. But if what I didn't want to see happen, which was it get voted down, I would then join the Charter Commission and take matters into my own hands. And so that's how I got involved in the process and filed my application.
We love an ultimatum. Yes.
And for me, I've been in Portland since the early or mid 90s. I moved here when I was 19 and have worked in and out of public service. I worked for the city of Portland, worked for Multnomah County, worked for Metro, and worked in community-based organizations, and saw this as an opportunity to really be intimately involved in ensuring we're moving our city forward. I also am raising my kids in the city now, and just ensuring and having the opportunity. One of the greatest honors that I've had on the commission for the past year and a half is we spent thousands of hours in conversation with Portlanders, right? And which is, something that we don't do often enough, right? Being in community and conversation with each other about what we want our city to look like and to feel like, and how we want to engage in it. So that has been an amazing opportunity, I think, for all 20 of us who served on the commission.
Yeah, could you actually talk a little bit more about the process as far as like how often are you all meeting? When you're getting feedback from people, what does that look like?
So when the commission first started, the process was very grueling, to be honest. We had our twice a month meetings for a while. And then once we formed subcommissions, those subcommittees met at least once a month. So there was definitely like weeks where we had 3 different meetings. And because everyone wants to be a part of all of the things, because we all care about everything, there was definitely moments in which we would basically see each other 4 times a week in these subcommittee meetings and larger full commission meetings. And as we got into a flow and started honing in on specifics, that's when we had our full commission meeting turn into once a month, and our subcommittee meetings were at least once a month, if not twice, for most of the subcommissions.
Yeah, and what I'd add to that is that we were also individually in conversation with, all of us have connections in the community. So we're out talking to our neighbors, we're out kind of giving formal presentations or feedback sessions with community-based organizations. So, it's not a lie to say that each of us has spent about 1,000 hours of unpaid labor for almost 2 years. And actually one of the critiques I think that folks have had about this process is that it has not been, and it's a myth, right, that it has not been well-informed and thoughtful. And we've spent almost 2 years building this process with thousands of Portlanders. We've had over 5,000 folks engage in the process, right? Either in direct community conversation or in taking a survey or coming to testify. So the proposal that's going to be on the ballot is directly informed from Portlanders and their experience living in the city.
And when we had proposals up for discussion, we had to then have listening sessions. These listening sessions were co-hosted by different community-based organizations in Portland, and they were looking at getting really focused feedback on some of the things that we were considering, and also even some of the values of the things that we were considering. And then once it moved from those focus groups, we had to have unlimited public testimony meetings, some of which were really short because not a lot of people signed up, and some others that were hours and hours long because they were unlimited. And so we had to have about, I think, 4 of those sessions in total. And it was a process, and we had them throughout different parts of the city to make sure that we were accessible as possible, as well as providing virtual testimony as an option as well, to make sure we are reaching as many Portlanders as we can through our translations, through our ASL, through our interpreters, and through us moving throughout the city.
Yeah, that doesn't sound thorough at all. But yeah, so we have 3 major provisions on the ballot coming this November. Let's just get into the knit and grit of what they're going to mean for Portland. So one is ranked choice voting. One is expanding the city council to 12 members, and there's also details in there about like the districts in which they come from. And then the last is adopting a city administrator form of government. So we just take those one by one. First, could you all explain what ranked choice voting is, and why it would be a good reform for Portland?
Yeah, you bet. But I might want to take a step back and talk. Salome referenced the fact that we established these set of guiding principles and outcomes that we wanted, regardless of what the policy was going to look like, that we wanted to achieve. And what we heard from Portlanders is that they want more accountability, more efficiency and effectiveness, and accessibility of city services. They also wanted more representation and more voice, and more opportunity to influence the decisions that were impacting their lives. So those principles are what we built this policy around. And that's what this measure is all about: ensuring increased accountability, accessibility, representation, and effectiveness. One of the components, ranked choice voting, gives voters more voice and more choice in the process. And it's pretty straightforward and simple. You get your ballot, and rather than right now, you just get to vote for one person, right? And sometimes, honestly, it's like choosing between the lesser of 2 evils, right? Or you have to make a strategic choice with your vote. You don't want to throw it away because this person is going to win. So Portlanders have often been faced to kind of make a decision, hold their nose, and make a decision about voting for their elected leaders. Ranked choice voting allows you to rank candidates in order of your preference. And essentially, that's just mean that, Salome is my number 1. Bruce, I like you too, so I'm going to rank you number 2, right? And what that results in, this is a voting method that happens all across the country. It happens in Benton County in Oregon. And in fact, Alaska just used ranked choice voting to elect their first and ever Indigenous member of Congress, who beat out Sarah Palin. So that's the voting method that is, again, being used in jurisdictions around the country. As a voter, your ballot will look a little different, but it'll be pretty straightforward. Again, you'll just have candidates on the ballot, and you get to rank most likely up to 5 of them in order of preference. You don't have to rank them. You can just vote for one if you choose. Or you can say, there are 3 people I like, and I'm going to rank them in order. And then there's kind of a mathematical tallying that happens once ballots are cast, and then a clear winner is chosen. And what we've seen in the research is that 2 things happen. One is folks like the outcome better. Ranked choice voting has led to more people of color and more women getting elected in local jurisdictions. And voters like the experience better, like it actually feels better for them to fill out their ballot. They feel like they're actually given a choice, a legitimate, meaningful choice to have their voice heard on the ballot.
Okay, yeah. And so let's talk about expanding the city council. So currently it is 6 members, 7 members.
City council is currently comprised of 5 members, 1 mayor, and 4 city councilors.
Okay, so 12 is a significant expansion. Why? How'd you come to 12?
So what we heard throughout all of our meetings, through many many, many hours of public testimony was people wanting there to be more representation on city council. Portland is a fairly large city, so the idea that we have 5 council members is quite honestly kind of ludicrous, considering that they are now one person that represents hundreds of thousands of people and perspectives. And the fact they're all voted at large means that we end up with the system that we currently have, which favors wealthier candidates and oftentimes candidates coming from the West Side or who live on the West Side. And so with the expanding the amount of seats on city council, we also heard overwhelmingly people wanting there to be district representation. And so when we came to district representation and expanding city council, we looked at all of the different portions of what we wanted to propose and tried to finesse them in a way that made them all stronger when put together. And so once we had established or started to feel like ranked choice voting was where we were going, we went more to the math around, well, what leads to more equitable outcomes for our community, because the city of Portland doesn't have any geographical space where it's a majority people of color or even Black residents for that matter. So how do we make sure that these community members who are on the margins still have a voice that matters in a ranked choice voting system? And so we talked about districts and we talked about multi-member districts, which is having more than one candidate per district. And so we settled on having 3 members per district. And so with 3 members per district, we saw that an increase in first time political folks being elected. We saw an increase in women being elected, people of color, just across the board, an increase for our what I would consider equity priority community members having a chance to be elected. And so with 3 members per district, we then said, well, what's a good sweet spot number? A number that expands city council from what it is now, but doesn't cause a giant explosion of like 47 that we see in some other cities that have a similar city size. And so we decide like, well, if we break the city into 4 districts, that'll give us 12 council members. And through a lot of public testimony, we recognized that 15 was the highest that people were willing to go with, but nothing less than 3 members per district. And so we landed with 12 being 3 members for and having 4 districts.
I would just add, Salome mentioned this, but just to provide some facts, since 1995, 75% of the people elected to city council have been white men. And as you mentioned, from the West Side, almost exclusively from the West Side or Inner East, there have been 2 members of the city council who have lived east of 82nd. And so moving to districts guarantees geographic representation for every part of the city, and having multiple winners, multiple folks in those districts guarantees that you will have representation regardless of like who you are, where you live, what your priorities are. You will find representation on the city council. You'll have multiple paths to entry, right? Like multiple folks, to build relationships with, to help you navigate and access city services, help pay a water bill, or help figure out how to get a permit, and multiple folks that you can connect with on a policy agenda. And we've seen that happen in jurisdictions across the country and across the world, because this combination of multi-winner districts and ranked choice voting, it's called proportional representation, which is the leading system of government in the democratic world.
Right. And that kind of brings us to the last one, which is adopting a city administrator, kind of a form of government. So what does that mean?
So right now, we have what's called a commission form of government, which means the mayor and the 4 city councilors, not only do they make policy, they vote on things, but they also are responsible for the day-to-day operations of the city. Each one of them is in charge of a bunch of bureaus. That's led to all kinds of problems, right? the work is in silos, it's inefficient, there's a lot of duplication of services, there's a lot of infighting. So we want to move away from the commission form of government to a city administrator form. What that means is that the mayor will be responsible ultimately to the voters for the day-to-day operations and service delivery of the city. And they will hire a city administrator to be the person who oversees all the bureaus. That city administrator has to be confirmed by the city councilor, the full city council, because we didn't want, the mayor to kind of like set up their own. We wanted to balance power and have a series of checks and balances. So a city administrator model means that services will be delivered more efficiently. We'll be able to see more cooperation and collaboration among bureaus. I mean, right now, like you could go to different bureaus, ask the same question and get different answers, right? And in fact, sometimes they're in conflict, which leads to either, inefficiency at best and kind of like paralyzed, in terms of service delivery on one end. So, I think the city administrator model, which we heard through public testimony repeatedly, that folks wanted someone whose job it was, this is what they do for a living, and to be kind of at making sure that everything was happening in a way that made sense and made it accessible for Portlanders.
And when we talked to a lot of members of the public, there were folks who wanted like a more classic city manager type structure. But one of the things that they overwhelmingly said that they valued was the idea of transparency and being able to hold their electeds accountable. And that's why we have the city administrator working under the mayor, is so that there is direct accountability for the voters in terms of outcomes that they would like to see.
Mm-hmm. So kind of with these changes right here is, one, just more representation, more efficacy. In some cases, just like modernizing the form of government. So one would think, these seem like things people would want, but there's been a fair amount of opposition to these proposals. I think there's a lawsuit that was recently dismissed actually to have them off the ballot. But can you just talk about, what has the opposition been like? Both, we've seen some things in the news, but then also, where's that coming from?
I think in all instances where you have groundbreaking change to promote groundbreaking outcomes, you're going to have opposition from those who benefit from this current structure. And I think that we as individuals oftentimes hold onto or remember the people who spoke negatively before we remember all the positive. And as we moved through as the commission, one of the things that I remind myself of is that the opposition is not as big as it looks. It's big in the sense that it has a lot of money. And what we are proposing makes their dollar value amount more equitable to an individual vote. And that's what they don't care for. They don't care for the idea that people will be voting for folks within their geographical district. They don't care for the fact that you'll have multi-member voting capabilities that will result in more people of color and women getting into office. They don't care for there to be this much change, essentially. And one of the things that I definitely believe is that when talking to your average Portlander, many people feel like the city does not work for them at the current state. Many people feel like the current city structure doesn't work for them or work for the city in itself. And so with this opposition, I think that we're having some very powerful people with deep pockets upset with the changes that we're trying to propose and trying to convince the city that this current status quo is actually working for them when it is not.
I just want to emphasize speak a little bit more about change, right? Like even the opposition saying, oh, we should change, but they're really only interested in small changes, right? Or in incremental change, where we heard overwhelmingly that Portlanders aren't just ready for big and bold change, but they're demanding it. Like what we referred to the ballot was in direct response from what we were hearing everywhere we went from Portlanders. They were demanding big and bold change to the systems in terms of service delivery and accessible services, and also who represent them, right? And so this is in response to what we heard from them. And, sometimes change makes people nervous.
And I would point that our commission on the charter reform has come from very diverse groups. It has come from individuals who have moved throughout different parts of the city, have worked through different parts of the city, some individuals who have activism in their backgrounds, other individuals who have provided social services. And so I think that it is completely false to say that we didn't talk to a lot of people, because even outside of the process that was the Charter Reform Commission to do outreach and hear unlimited testimony, we as ourselves as individuals have our own lived experience that ties back to different communities that we belong to as well, that we heard from a lot more people than we think people really give us credit for.
I think the campaign also, the folks who are running the campaign are having that same experience, right? A broad section of Portland broad and diverse section, all sections of Portland coming together to lend their voice behind this. I mean, if you look at the organizations who've endorsed the campaign already, it's, the ACLU, the City Club, the Portland League of Women Voters, it's Urban League, it's Building Power for Communities of Color, right? It's folks who have all different kinds of lived experience coming together because they recognize that things have to change, and this is the change that's going to move us forward.
Right. And is there anything else people should know going into the vote in November?
I mean, if they want to find more out about how to get engaged in the campaign, go to Portland United for Change. So you can learn more about the policies and how you'll be personally impacted, and then how to get engaged and help and make sure it happens in November.
I'd also say that Portland should really look into who are the proponents, who are the opposition, and really take a dive into the why, asking those questions, asking how is this going to impact me, but also like, why is this group opposing, or why is this group supporting, and really looking into their values of what they want to see for the city.
Awesome. Yeah, Becca, Salome, thank you again for taking the time to break down the Charter Commission proposals with us. And everyone, November, vote's coming.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yes, thank you.